Imagine a world where pleasure isn't about indulgence, excess, or constant excitement. Imagine if true happiness could be found in simplicity. A glass of water when you're thirsty, a quiet conversation with a friend, or the absence of pain. Now picture a man over 2,000 years ago who taught exactly that, while the world around him chased luxury, power, and opulence. That man was Epicurus, and his vision of pleasure is not what you think. Welcome to the profound paradox of hedonism, not as a gateway to wild abandon, but as a path to peace, self-control, and even wisdom. Welcome to the unfolding journey, where we explore philosophy, history, and the deeper questions of human experience. Whether you're a seeker of wisdom, a lover of ideas, or just curious about how ancient thinkers can reshape our modern lives, you're in the right place. Every week, we break down complex ideas into accessible insights, because the journey of the mind is the greatest adventure of all. Now, let's delve into how Epicurus redefined pleasure and challenge the very foundations of what it means to live a good life. Say the word hedonism today, and you'll likely conjure images of lavish feasts, wild parties, and a live-for-the-moment mindset. It's often synonymous with excess, impulsivity, and materialism. The term has been twisted over centuries, often used as a critique of those who seem to pursue pleasure without any thought of consequence. But for Epicurus, hedonism meant something radically different. Epicurus, who lived from 341 to 270 BCE, was a philosopher in ancient Greece who founded a school known as the Garden. Unlike Plato's Academy or Aristotle's Lyceum, the Garden was a refuge from the noise of political life and the ambitions of empire. It welcomed women and slaves, remarkably inclusive for its time, and became a place to explore a single, simple question: how can we live a happy life? To answer this, Epicurus returned to the root of human experience, pleasure. But not all pleasures are created equal. At the core of Epicurean philosophy is the pleasure-pain principle, the idea that pleasure is the beginning and the end of a blessed life, and that we naturally seek pleasure and avoid pain. This sounds straightforward, until you realize that Epicurus didn't define pleasure in the way most people do. He wasn't talking about fleeting or superficial pleasure. In fact, he warned against overindulgence and excess. Why? Because such things often lead to more pain than they're worth. Think of it this way. That third glass of wine might feel good in the moment, but the hangover the next day? Not so much. An expensive luxury item might thrill you temporarily, but the stress of debt or the constant desire for more will only fuel anxiety. To Epicurus, true pleasure came from tranquility, or what the Greeks called ataraxia, a state of serene calmness and freedom from disturbance. In this sense, pleasure wasn't about stimulation, it was about relief. Relief from fear, from pain, and from unnecessary desire. Epicurus made a crucial distinction that still resonates today: the difference between natural and unnatural desires. Natural desires are those that are necessary for happiness, survival, and comfort. These include food, shelter, friendship, security, health. These desires are easy to satisfy and lead to contentment. On the other hand, unnatural and unnecessary desires are often rooted in vanity, social status, or the craving for luxury. Fame, wealth beyond need, power, endless variety, and indulgence. These are harder to satisfy, often insatiable, and tend to produce more anxiety than joy. Epicurus argued that if we can learn to focus only on our natural desires and cultivate gratitude for their satisfaction, we can free ourselves from the tyranny of want. In his own words, "If you wish to be rich, do not add to your money, but subtract from your desires." Here lies the central paradox in Epicurean hedonism. The less you need, the happier you are. This doesn't mean renouncing all pleasure, like the Stoics might advocate. Rather, Epicurus encourages us to enjoy life's simple pleasures, but always with an eye on consequences. He believed some pleasures are simply not worth the pain they bring. As such, he advised us to think strategically about pleasure. Ask yourself, will this pleasure cause more suffering later? Is this desire really necessary for my well-being? Could I be just as content with less? It's not about denial, it's about discernment. The truly wise person, for Epicurus, is like a gardener, pruning unnecessary desires and cultivating a small patch of meaningful joy, rather than chasing an endless jungle of wants. Epicurus understood that much of human misery stems not just from unmet desires, but from fear, especially the fear of death. To counter this, he offered one of his most famous teachings: death is nothing to us. Why? Because when we exist, death is not present. And when death is present, we no longer exist. In other words, death is the end of sensation, and since pleasure and pain are based on sensation, we have nothing to fear from death. This radical idea was meant to free us from one of the greatest sources of anxiety, the dread of non-existence. And once fear is removed, fear of gods, of punishment, of death, we're left with a clear path to peace. While Epicurus spoke often of avoiding pain and living simply, he didn't promote isolation. In fact, he placed extraordinary value on friendship, not romantic love or social networks, but deep, authentic friendship rooted in mutual trust. He once said, "Of all the things that wisdom provides for the happiness of the whole life, by far the most important is the acquisition of friendship." In the garden, friendships were cultivated as the bedrock of tranquility. Friends offered emotional support, philosophical dialogue, and shared security. They were a source of joy not based on utility, but on connection. In today's hyper-connected yet emotionally distant world, this message is more vital than ever. Epicurus was widely respected in his lifetime, but his philosophy was later misunderstood, even maligned. Early Christians, for instance, saw his teachings as godless and hedonistic in the worst sense. They misunderstood his focus on pleasure, assuming it meant moral laxity. Over time, the word Epicurean came to mean someone who chases fine dining and sensual delight, a far cry from the man who lived off bread, cheese, and water. Ironically, the original Epicurus would have found this modern label both incorrect and unnecessary. His message wasn't about excess. It was about clarity, about choosing wisely, about recognizing that life is short and our energy should be spent cultivating peace, not chasing status or feeding desire. What does all this mean for us in the 21st century? It means that in a culture obsessed with more stuff, more success, more stimulation, there's a countercultural wisdom in choosing less, in choosing enough, in cultivating inner peace rather than external achievement. An Epicurean lifestyle today might include practicing gratitude daily, limiting social media and comparison, eating simply but mindfully, nurturing a few deep friendships over many shallow ones, letting go of fears we cannot control. This is hedonism with limits, a philosophy of freedom, not freedom to consume endlessly, but freedom from the chains of endless consumption. Epicurus challenges us to rethink happiness, not as a feverish pursuit of highs, but as a quiet contentment in the everyday. And in that sense, perhaps he was not a philosopher of indulgence, but a philosopher of peace. So, next time you hear the word hedonism, remember Epicurus. Remember that real pleasure might not be found in what you chase, but in what you choose to let go of. That the richest life might be the simplest one. And that true happiness lies not in the wild highs, but in the steady calm of a well-lived day. If this journey into Epicurean thought has sparked your curiosity or helped you rethink what pleasure really means, there's so much more to explore. Subscribe to The Unfolding Journey for more weekly insights into philosophy, history, and the art of living wisely. Leave a comment sharing how you personally define happiness, or if you've ever found joy in simplifying your life. And as always, thank you for being part of the journey. Until next time, seek peace, not just pleasure.